And finally, I am in the UK.
Yeah, great to have you in the UK, Janine.
And one of the things you shared with Marie, which resonated with what I've been hearing, is those stories that coaches can make up when they are potentially in their training, but also when they've finished their training.
It's, a lot of times I will hear coaches say, well, I have to do it like this because this is the model I learned.
What do I need to ask so that I'm coaching according to the ICF or some other body's rules?
So we are focusing on the right way to often do things. And that's not a bad thing because we're learning a new skill.
The breath, the way that we say it, the tone, the pace, how loud or soft we say it,
what the practicalities, how that dance looks like, how that fertile void unfolds.
Hello listeners, we are your co-hosts Janine Bailey and Marie Quigley for the Empower World Coaching and Leadership Podcast.
Empower World brings guests who are making a difference to the world to inspire coaches and leaders who lead with mind, heart and soul.
Hello and welcome listeners to the next episode of the Empower World Coaching and Leadership Podcast. And finally, I am in the UK with Marie. We're in separate locations, but we are in the same country, which is amazing. So welcome, listeners. Welcome, Marie. Lovely to see you.
Yeah, great to have you in the UK, Janine. Yes, we haven't met yet, but hopefully we will soon be able to give each other a proper hug.
Yes.
We're settling in.
Yes, it's there's a lot to do. There's a lot to just try and find a place to live, really.
That little thing.
Yeah. Got all of our stuff arriving on a ship, I think, in the next few days, and unfortunately, it's not going to be with us. I just needed a few books and a few warmer clothes, really.
Oh yes. Welcome to the UK.
It certainly has been wet and a little bit cold. So, but again, So
I was going to say we may not have met each other, but we've certainly been doing a lot of work behind the scenes to prepare for our up-and-coming coach training and all the other programs that we deliver, supervision, mentoring, all of the wonderful things we do together. So we might not have seen each other, but we certainly are doing a lot of work.
We are, and I look forward to that hug. So, and we were talking earlier about what we might talk about in this particular podcast episode, and reflecting upon what some of our potentially our mentoring students have been sharing, and what has been coming up for them as challenges. And we both mentor a lot of coaches to support them to become credentialed or renew or upgrade their credential. And one of the things you shared with Marie, which resonated with what I've been hearing, is those stories that coaches can make up when they are potentially in their training, but also when they've finished their training, about the rules of what they can do and can't do. It's amazing, isn't it, how much what they hold on to and perhaps don't listen to as well, that could really set them free in their coaching practice. So the rules that they make up potentially really get in the way. So that's something that we wanted to share in this episode.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's, a lot of times I will hear coaches say, well, I have to do it like this because this is the model I learned, or this is the structure I need to practice, or I must do a coaching session for an hour long, or I must stay with a client until they get what they want. So apart from models and structures and tick boxes, there's also lots of beliefs about what they think they should be doing with a client. And it's often about the doing part rather than the being part, which is a big shift in a coach's thinking when they think about who am I being with my client rather than what am I doing.
It is a big shift, as you say, Marie, to really come into ourselves as coaches so that we can be present with ourselves, so that we can also be present with our client. And in that state of being present and just listening to what the client is bringing in, and trusting that process can support us as coaches to let go of those rules, come out of our head, and really embody those core competencies of coaching, which again, many coaches see as a tick list, a checklist of what they should do and shouldn't do. And that's what it can seem like on the surface. But actually, those competencies are really designed to support really free, open, creative, flowing conversations versus what do I need to ask? What do I need to ask so that I'm coaching according to the ICF or some other body's rules, so that I am coaching. So actually, if we really understand and know those competencies, we can actually become freer. So that's one thing. As you say, Marie, there's lots of different rules that the coaches will make up when they've perhaps finished their coach training.
Yeah.
You might want to add to that, Marie.
Well, I was just thinking about how we learn as well. And, we talk about the 4 levels of learning in our training. And an example is when we learn to drive a car. And when we are learning something new, it feels uncomfortable, particularly as adults. So we are focusing on the right way to often do things. And that's not a bad thing, because we're learning a new skill, we're learning a new practice. We want to be proficient at driving the car or learning whatever we're learning. And then the information is new. And so we're a bit clunky, and we practice it, and then we suddenly get better. And finally, we are doing it in a way that is natural and organic. And we're driving the car from A to B, and sometimes we don't even know how we've gotten there. So we know that happens in any learning environment. And as adults, it can be uncomfortable to learn something new. And we also may have beliefs that there is always a right and a wrong way to do things. And the thing about coaching is it's an art and science. There is that dance, there is that creativity that comes into it. And there are structures, models, processes, philosophies that are really useful to learn about. And, when we're training coaches, we always say, we're going to share some things with you, but we want you to test them out. We want to see what's going to work for you. There is no cookie cutter approach. But that learning of the initial stages is really important.
It so is, isn't it? And I think to add to that, I think many coaches, new coaches, tend to overcomplicate things, tend to think it's more trickier. Even though, yes, there are many elements to understand about coaching, the actual process of coaching is potentially much easier than many coaches believe it to be, and perhaps have a belief that they've got to come up with really fancy, complicated questions, and need to potentially be above it or ahead of the game, and be armed with clever questions. But actually, it's so much more simpler than that, really. When we really start to appreciate that coaching is a process of asking a question, listening to what our client shares, listening deeply beyond just the words. We're listening for the somatics, the emotions, the keywords, the habits, and for us to behavioral strategies, and for us to reflect that back. Just be the mirror of what our client is sharing with us, so that they can hear their thoughts, ideas, strategies from another perspective. It creates a sort of a detachment, I guess, when they hear their words said perhaps in a succinct way and highlighting what might be really important in terms of what they've shared. And then just following it up with a question, say more about that, or how does that land for you, or what are you starting to notice? So the questions don't need to be clever, complicated, convoluted, stacked type of questions. So, if you take that away, that you're the mirror and reflecting back what is being heard, sensed, noticed, observed, and that's a great start to support your client to go on that deeper reflective journey of starting to understand their thoughts, ideas, emotions, etc.
Yeah. And often the questions arise from what the client says. So you can't pre-prepare the questions. If you're really paying attention and are curious, you're hearing something from the client that formulates a question within you that comes out of your mouth without you doing too much thinking about it. And I'm thinking about a mentoring call I did yesterday, and the coach was really good at asking questions, but they were missing a whole lot of information that was also in the system of their partnership. So they were forgetting to notice what was happening. So they were so focused on facilitating growth and learning, moving forward in that competency, that they just missed a whole load of information that was being offered to the system that could have been useful to say, so I noticed this shift in energy. I hear your voice change. What's happening for you? I noticed that you stopped still. What's going on? And so sometimes I'll say to coaches who are really good at questions, stop asking questions and start paying attention. Start noticing what's happening. And as you said, reflect it back as the mirror to see what that gives the person that you're working with. It's amazing what happens when somebody just reflects back to you what they notice about you. It's very empowering.
It's so true, Marie. It's, we say, don't we, that our communication is not just the words. It's the energy, it's the physiology, it's the breath, the way that we say it, the tone, the pace, how loud or soft we say it. It's reflecting those things back that you notice that are shifts in the client's energy, which is part of the core competency, getting curious and, getting inquisitive about those shifts. That supports the client to start to understand their unconscious thinking or habits or ways of being in the world. So yes, incredibly powerful when we can reflect back those even very subtle shifts in our clients' physiology or whatever they share. So I might see my client all of a sudden flicking up their eyes towards the ceiling, which perhaps isn't something they not ordinarily do. And so I'll reflect that back and say, I've noticed your eye just flick up now. What came in? And it's incredible what comes up, because that type of questioning allows the client to reflect even deeper. Yeah, what did come up for me? And it always translates into deeper meaning of what's really going on.
Yeah. So often you'll hear a coach say, well, I learned in my training that I have to ask powerful questions. So I need a list of powerful questions to arm myself when I go into the coaching session. So that's kind of a myth, really. It's powerful questions can be, of course, really impactful. But if the coachee is speaking, if the client is speaking, and the question arises from what they're saying or how they're being, then it can be even more impactful. So it's about trusting the process and trusting the client and letting go of the myth that I need 20 powerful questions to come into this session with.
Yes, and those reflections and those simple questions that we follow up those reflections with are and can be very powerful.
Yeah.
So there's, I was just going to say, there's one of the ways that you coaches complicate things. I think it needs to be, so much more. The questions need to be so much more clever.
Yeah.
Actually,
yes.
Follow your client, and then allow the question to develop. Simple, short, to allow the client to let the reflection land, and then reflect on it again.
Yeah.
Sorry, what were you about to say?
I was just thinking about the number of models a coach can learn in their coach training. Sometimes they learn 10 different models. Sometimes they're focused on one model that they're really honing their skills onto. And then they come out and think, I have to use this model, and I have to use the whole of the model in every session I'm working with the client. And I'm a bad coach if I'm not achieving the structure of that model perfectly. I'm putting that in inverted commas for whoever's listening to this, because there's no such thing as perfection in coaching. There's always another way to do something. But that belief that I need, and it's in the language we use as well, I need to complete this, or I need this type of structure, or I need to, have a way forward at the end that is really going to move the client forward. That might not happen. So it's about being at ease with the process. And I think, and I know you believe this too, that the competencies are much more flexible than a structured model that you need to follow, because you can be dancing with those core competencies in many different aspects of the coaching conversation. So that's something we need to let go of, I think, if we want to become more masterful in our work. Is I even find myself sitting back when I let go of models. I sit back and I, as John Leary Joyce describes it, I embrace the fertile void between myself and the client and allow whatever emerges to emerges. But because of my training, I've got the structure of the competencies in the back of my mind that, of course, as a professional, I'm paying attention to. But the most important thing is what's happening with the client.
Yeah. Yes, beautifully said. And embracing that void, when that happens, I know that my assumption is that something new and powerful is to emerge here, because there's this not knowing. So by just getting curious, it's amazing, and embodying the competencies really deeply just allows that emergence of whatever needs to happen in that not knowing. And I was in a mentoring class today, mentoring a number of students at a college, and the reading today was around 15 tools and techniques for coaches. So one of the things that was emphasized is that, yes, there are all these tools, techniques, processes that are out there, which can be really powerful to use. And it's about listening to your intuition as to whether something might be useful for your client based on what they are sharing with you, and asking for permission to potentially use a process that might help with their thinking. But while using that process, still embody the core competencies. So let go of following a structured way of asking questions, and notice how things are landing for your client in that process. Get curious about what are they starting to notice, what are they starting to learn, or what's happening with them now based on perhaps some changes or shifts in their energy that you're noticing. So let go of that linear type of structure and flow with it. And potentially, with that flow, you might support your client to create great awareness and a shift moving forward versus having to follow the whole process through. So it's always tapping into your intuition and your client's intuition as to how they're tracking with that process.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about a new mentee that I'm working with, and I sent her the core competencies to think about before she started the mentoring program. And she shared how overwhelming she felt when she saw them, because in her coach training, they hadn't focused on the core competencies. They weren't aligned with the ICF, but she, as an international coach, wanted to be aligned with that body because it would give her more scope in work. And she felt a little bit overwhelmed. But when she actually did the coaching and we brought the core competencies in and said, here's what you're doing here and here's what you're doing here, she was like, it was like a light bulb moment going on for her, that the words on the page don't necessarily represent very clearly sometimes what the practicalities, how that dance looks like, how that fertile void unfolds in real time with a client. So, if you think you have to tick the boxes, you are going to be more structured and more rigid. And a lot of coaches do think they have to tick the boxes. But that is absolutely not the purpose of these competencies. It's about developing our skill set, but also our own personal development in how we meet another person, how we dance with another person, how we connect on a deep level with another person. And that was so refreshing for her to see how in practical terms she's already doing it. But had she tried to do them, she would perhaps have had a different experience with her client.
Yeah. Do versus be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Be in those competencies, those ways of being, to support our clients to go on a wonderful, wonderful journey of self-exploration and discovery. Yeah. So, yes, we would encourage learning different structures, processes, but at the same time, be present. Really listen to your intuition and your client's intuition to create a powerful coaching session where you're in the moment versus in a structure and potentially in your head thinking of, okay, what's the next question?
Exactly. And one of the things we say, particularly after we complete level 1 training, Janine, is, okay, so you've learned all the structure. Now we want you to kind of break the rules and play and experiment. And that's a really good philosophy to have, I think, as a coach, is don't believe everything you say. Test things out. Test out what works for you as a coach, because what works for me might not work for you. And we don't want to make cookie cutter coaches. You are unique in your own way, Janine, and the way you coach is definitely linked to who you are being in the world, and therefore your clients are attracted to you because of that. And it's the same with me. And once you kind of honor yourself and welcome yourself wholly into this, you can be yourself in the coaching practice, as well as you said, when you need to reach down and bring a tool in that might be appropriate if the client wants that to be, then they could be really powerful tools. But just experiment to see what works for you.
Yeah. So that's really good advice for coaches listening out there to really question, challenge some of those beliefs that you might be holding that are holding you back from being your best, most powerful self as an individual, as a coach, in support of your client's development. So check in. Am I making stuff up that is stopping me, those limiting beliefs that you've learned about in your training, that's stopping me from stepping into my power as a coach? And we would always encourage ongoing, continuous mentoring, supervision, training to support the development of you, because I would say we never get to a point, and I know you would too, Marie, we never get to a point of, I've got it, and I've got it, I know it all. There's always something new to learn in support of ourselves and others, and it's part of our 6 core needs to continually develop, expand, and grow. So, coaches, we trust that you have got value from our podcast today to really test and challenge yourself as to whether you're making up those rules that stop you from being your most powerful self. I'm going to check in with you, Marie. What other potential advice would you give to coaches on this journey of mastery?
Be willing to test and fail if we want, and then learn from it. Listen to your work. Listen from a place of love, but also an objective mind. What works really well with one client may not work well with another client. So test these things out. Appreciate who you are and your own self-development as well, and bring that wisdom, not particularly in advice, but bring that wisdom in embodiment as you enter your work. Remember that you're a step ahead of the client because you are trained. You have done work on yourself, particularly if you've done our program. The way we teach coaches is you do the work on yourselves as you're doing the training. So you've already got this wisdom that you can be yourself in the session and then experiment with your clients, with their permission, of course, to see what works and develop your practice more and more.
Yeah, wonderful words of wisdom, Marie. And it's so true that, if we're not squirming, we're not learning. So it can be an uncomfortable space to do this, but coming from that place of love and compassion for ourselves so that we don't fall in the hole, that we learn from it to move forward in a much more powerful way, The only way we can, not the only way, but one of the most powerful ways that we can grow is to get feedback from ourselves, from others, from our clients as to what is working well and what's the stretch.
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that. That's just triggered one thing that a coach said to me recently. I don't know if I'm doing well. I don't know how I am doing because after training, I haven't had any feedback on my work. And that's one thing I would encourage you. Let somebody who's maybe a step ahead of you listen into your work. Somebody who knows these competencies well enough to really stand beside you and give you effective feedback in partnership with yourself to see what you are doing well and where the areas of growth are. They're always there for us. No matter where you are on your journey of mastery, we can all learn something new. So if you're feeling a little bit lost or a little bit, am I doing a good job here? Just record your sessions. Speak with somebody who you trust, get a mentor, and support yourself to develop your own awareness.
Wonderful, Marie. Thank you, listeners. Thank you for listening into our podcast. We really appreciate feedback, suggestions. We are always open to what you'd like to hear more of. And we trust that you can join us on our next podcast. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening. You can find out more about us on our website, www.empower-world.com, and on our social media networks, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Be empowered.